Joined today by Chris Gaston, founder and president of Family First Sports Firm. And Chris, my first question for you is, have you ever personally had an experience with the police involving either unconstitutional nonviolent harassment or unconstitutional non-lethal police brutality?
Unfortunately, I've had several run-ins with just unconstitutional police behavior. And as we discussed, as a black man, it almost feels like it's just part of, I don't want to say your destiny, but it's just a way of life. It's almost like breathing fresh air. Like you expect to get harassed by the cops. A few years ago, me and my wife, we lived in Pearland, and it was just one street where everybody know black people shouldn't ride down because you're going to get harassed by the police. And God rest his soul. I remember one day we were headed to Chris Saeed's. Remember Chris Saeed's?
Yes.
We were headed to his funeral, and the cops pulled me over. I was in a Chrysler 300, which at the time, I guess it's kind of like the dope boy's car in the police mind back then when they first came out. And they pulled me over for no apparent reason. Next thing you know, they had their hands on their guns, and they had 3 or 4 police cars pulled over. And they still really never explained to me what they pulled me over for. They checked my license and registration. Everything was good, and they let us go. But I'm like, sir, I'm trying to make it to a funeral. It was just a traumatic experience, but that's on one of the lighter ends. One real traumatic experience was I was at Rice University, and this one I had Houston Preps, and I was super trainer and working out all the kids in Houston, and had a great relationship with the Rice staff, and they let me use the back gym. So you know the main court, right? What is it, archery court or whatever?
Yes.
Do you know there's like a back gym in the back of that? Like you walk past a swimming pool, and there's like a little small hole in the wall gym.
Yes, yes.
So, you know, they let me go.
I've worked kids out in that small gym myself. So go ahead.
Yep. Okay, so Rice was having a basketball camp, one of their little, Rice men's teams camps, whatever, they charge kids a certain amount of money to come in there and whatever. So that camp was going on at the same time my workouts were going on. So it was about 2 or 3 kids came in, and the people at the front desk said, "Oh, you here for the Rice camp?" "Oh, no, we're here to work out for Gaston." They walked to the back. It happens again. "Oh, you here for the Rice camp?" "No, we're here to work out with Coach Gaston." It happened the third time. I guess the dude, the director of basketball, I was like, "Wait a minute, man. We're trying to make money and run a thing. All these people are coming here for Gaston," which they knew I was back there. So he comes back there. And mind you, I got pro clients and everything. And he walks in the middle of the floor like, "You got to shut this workout down right now." I'm like, "Wait, huh? I'm trying to run a camp, and you got kids in here. I'm trying to run a camp, and everybody coming through my gym trying to work out with you instead of going to my camp." I'm like, "Sir, I didn't even know y'all had a camp today. Well, you need to end the workout now, or I'm calling the police." And on my head, I'm like, "Okay, no problem, sir." So you remember Arsalan?
Yes.
Arsalan Kazemi and Ahmad Ibrahim, those are like my guys. Those are like I knew those guys since they first came from overseas. I was just sitting on the bench talking to them. I had all my cones, picking up all my equipment. I was just sitting down talking to them like, "Man, we're not going to be able to finish the workout." I have a lot of parents in there. I'm having to go sit down and explain to them, "Hey, guys, I'm sorry. We're going to have to cancel the workout for today." So I didn't argue with the man or nothing, Next thing you know, the police come in there. And they said, "Chris Gaston, come here." They pulled me into the hallway, and they said, "What's your name?" I said, "You just told me my name, sir." "Do you have ID on you?" I said, "No, I don't bring my ID in the gym." Then the next thing they said, "You under arrest." I'm like, "For what?" "Trespassing." I said, "Sir, how did I trespass, sir? What am I doing?" They said, "You trying to resist arrest, boy?" They called me a boy. "You trying to resist arrest, boy?" Body slammed me to the ground. Right there. Put me in handcuffs. All my equipment in the gym. Now here I am, this big figure walking through Houston. All these kids in the main gym in handcuffs. Walking through a basketball camp, they got me in handcuffs. And so I'm like, okay, man, they're going to give me a little ticket or fine. They took me to the little Rice campus, PD or whatever. Had me handcuffed to the chair like I'm a criminal, Something, man, just give me my ticket or fine so I can go home. This is just embarrassing, Next thing I know, the cops came. They took me downtown and booked me. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm like, this is crazy. So now I'm here sitting in jail like I'm a hardened criminal for working kids out, something I'm giving back to the community. As you know, in workouts, half them kids weren't even paying anyway, And so it was a long ordeal, man. I went to jail. Now eventually got a lawyer, and then some kind of, honestly, it was so long ago, it's really traumatic thinking about it. But I don't even remember how I even got, I think the Rice AD, I ended up calling the coaches or something, the Rice AD or somebody ended up, I don't know, but the charges got dropped. But the fact that I had to go through all that was, I mean, it was crazy, man. Just the public humiliation and embarrassment. And if I had the knowledge I have now, I would have sued them for $100 million, you know, but I just wanted I just wanted the case to go away, you know.
Yeah, you know, like I said, I've worked out kids in that back gym, and I've never been body slammed by the cops. I've never had the cops called on me.
Yeah, that's crazy.
The only 3 times in my life that I've been unconstitutionally harassed by the police, it was because I was in a black neighborhood, and they couldn't figure out that a white person might be in a black neighborhood because we have black friends or a black girlfriend.
Right. This is weird. Why is this white guy over here?
Or there's a restaurant in the neighborhood
Right.
that we enjoy eating at. Or in my case, the first 2 times it happened, I worked at Yates High School. So yeah, you got to kind of drive into Third Ward in order to get to Yates, where I work
Right.
as a teacher. And so even the times that I've been unconstitutionally harassed by the police was based on their racism toward black people, because they associate black neighborhoods with drugs and things like that, and consequently assumed I was there for nefarious purposes. They're so racist that could not occur to them that there are non-nefarious purposes for a white person to be in a black neighborhood. And so my follow-up question is, and I know you haven't done a formal survey, but amongst your circle of closest friends and family who are black, roughly what % of them have at a minimum experienced unconstitutional, nonviolent police harassment?
I would want to say 100%. I don't think it's that high, but it has to be at least 75, 80%. And it might be 100% because, like, if I ask my mom, she probably has blocked some stuff out because it was just a normal day for you to get harassed or unfairly followed around the jewelry store or something. So it might be 100%. We might not even realize it, but it's definitely above 75, 80% for sure.
And if we're talking about black men only, it's probably a higher % than 75 or 80.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. You remember my good friend. You remember Indy Eby?
Yes.
No, he was an NBA pro, went straight out of high school. I never forget one night we were in the jewelry store, and he walked in there with a wife beater and some shorts. You know, we just came from working out. Like, he's not finna put a suit and tie on to go to the jewelry store. And I remember, like I say, it's a lot of traumatic experience. I don't even remember the full story, but I remember we were in the store. I remember they locked the doors. We went in there, they locked the doors on us. And then Evie was like, yo, what are you doing? Like, I can afford to buy the store if I want. Like, what are y'all? And he went to jail that night. He went to the Sugarland jail. I can't remember why or what or how it happened. But I remember having to drive his car. Like, yeah, man, like you say, it's a lot of experiences that you honestly block out. But he went to jail for looking at jewelry. And I can't remember the whole details of why or what. But I do remember we was in there looking at jewelry. He had a wife beater on. And they might have told him he had to put a shirt on, or you're not supposed to be in here, or what are you guys doing? They probably thought we was casing it or was about to rob him. Because, you know, we young kids coming from the gym with shorts and a T-shirt on. And, yeah, Indy went to jail that night, man. I'll never forget.
That's unfortunately very believable.
Yes.
I wish that I hadn't heard so many stories of a similar vein, because there's an experiential empathy gap between white people and black people. We don't experience this as white people, and so we don't have enough empathy to do anything other than reflexively disbelieve these types of stories, which is just, you know, and I was the same way too growing up. I mean, I grew up in a mostly white neighborhood and didn't really hardly know any black people really until I started to fall in love with basketball in about '88. And then when I went to Lamar High School,
Pete, your your Zoom is freezing.
Hang on.
Pete.
Hey, are you on Wi-Fi or cell service?
I think I'm on the Wi-Fi.
Okay. You're back. So can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I remember getting to Lamar High School, which is a very diverse high school, and
Yeah.
I'd gone to St. John's for 9 years, where
Mhm.
we had one black kid in our class until 6th grade, and then maybe 2 or 3. And then I transferred to Kincaid for a little bit, and we had a
Mhm.
small handful of black kids in our class there. And then I transferred to Lamar, which is about 1/3 white, 1/3 Latino, and 1/3 black. And I would hear these stories, the man, I got pulled over on the way to school today. A cop had a gun to my forehead. And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't,
Right.
that's never, I've been pulled, that never happened. And I'm like, well, did you roll a stop sign or something? It's like, it was very hard for me to accept that these stories were true because they never happened to me. Again, the
Right.
experiential empathy gap. But then by about the 5th or 6th story you hear, that's when you're like, oh, fuck. Like, we're still doing this shit. I
Yep.
totally thought in the 80s and the early 90s that shit happened in the 60s and the 50s. Right? It did not, and to the extent that it happened in the more modern times, I absolutely thought that it was isolated. Oh, this stuff, maybe it happens every now and then, but it's not. But as I started hearing more and more stories, it clicked where it was like, these are people I break bread with. These are my teammates. This is family. And when your 6th or 7th
Right.
person you love
Right.
tells you the same story, then your eyes kind of start to, I'm not even going to say I open it. They open my eyes for me and kind of started me down the path to the man I eventually became. And so, speaking of isolated, if it's 75 or 80%, including men and women, and probably much higher than that, looking at men only. And again, as we talked about before we formally started the interview, as white people, we way too often fail to culturally connect the reality that the unconstitutional, non-violent police harassment, which is pervasive, that's the cultural foundation that permits the brutality and the murder. And we as white people fail to make that essential connection. And when looking at them as one collectively, as we should, because of the inexorable link between these things, I'm curious to know, do you consider this problem to be isolated or something that's more pervasive that we probably finally need to address as a nation?
No, it's definitely not isolated. And all the things we're seeing on TV, people catching up. Imagine the things that's not being seen. Imagine the people that's in the back alley getting treated like George Floyd, but it's not on camera. And even now, you're starting to see on social media a lot of things of people that was getting choked out and body slammed and killed that happened 6 months ago, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, and it's just now coming to light. So I mean, it's definitely not isolated. Like I can speak from personal experience. It's not isolated at all.
Yeah, I obviously agree with you completely. Again, the 5th or 6th time that I heard the same stories, it was like, my friends were prying my eyes open and requiring me to have a greater amount of empathy. And it's a long journey because the thing is that the generational brainwashing is a major problem on the topic of racism.
Right.
And so I was raised not even necessarily by my parents. My parents didn't use the N-word or, burn crosses in yards. My parents were not overtly racist white people. Now, I certainly had friends whose parents were, but it's just societally in general, the images you absorb on television. I'll tell an abbreviated story. When I was working at Georgia Tech for Paul, the Katrina hit. And so we had a lot of New Orleanians living in our gym, and the vast majority of them. And there was one woman who was acting foolishly, yelling at people, cussing people out. And I'm talking about college kids doing like a food drive, and she's cussing them out. She was just, she was a fool. And every other person there was not. Every other person there was acting as you would expect. Like, man, I lost my home, and y'all gave me a space and a shower and some food. Like, y'all are strangers. Like, y'all don't have to do that. Like, thank you,
Right.
like you would expect. Like normally when you help someone when you don't need to, they tend to be appreciative. That's fairly universal, not literally universal, but a clear majority, And so I go home and turn on the news that night. Who do you think was the one person they interviewed?
Of course.
Of course. And
Yeah.
that was such a, sometimes in the movies where a person has the aha moment where like 1,000 images go flash through there. That happened to me. And I was just like, man, and I was already pretty far down my journey of trying to be, a much better person. But that still was I was 27, 28 years old. And it was like, man, like all of the images I've seen. And that a lot of white people in Atlanta who watch the local news, they see that and go typical. And it was exactly not typical, right?
Right.
Now, if those are the only images you see on the news of black people, and you're 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, that stuff tends to stick with us, unfortunately. So it's like our parents, our grandparents, our friends' parents, but just society in general, whether it's the media or whether it's politicians, the topic of racism comes up and a white politician will say, 70% of black children are born out of wedlock. That's the real problem. And it's like, well, so let's say that is a real problem with American black people. Now, I can point out that when you factor in poverty rates, black women actually give birth out of wedlock at a slightly lower rate than white women. So it's not a black thing. But let's for the moment say it is. Why do we think that means racism isn't also a problem? Like,
one doesn't have to do nothing with the other. Like,
can't they both be true? So, anyway.
Right.
Well, I'm curious to know what else is on your mind.
You said something that was very impactful. You said, what's the term? You said racial brainwashing. That was a powerful term.
Generational brainwashing. Generational brainwashing.
Because sometimes, I'm not going to say we can be our own worst enemy, but like I said, I work in the sports agency business. So I talk to a lot of families. I deal with a lot of players. I had one situation, obviously I won't say the name. It was a top player that I was dealing with. And the guy that I work with, I brought this partner to the table, and the family was looking at this guy like, are you qualified? Who are you? You look too young and blah, 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 right? Fast forward a year later, a white man verifies this guy, says, hey, man, this guy's a good dude, blah, blah, blah. And they like, oh, wow, yeah, man, this dude, he's really good. He's awesome, man. We should work with this guy. I'm like, here I am. You guys know me forever. I bring this guy to the table and you look down on him. When a white guy verifies him and says he's good enough, now all of a sudden he's just outstanding person and looking forward to working with him and stuff. And I call that generational brainwashing because of, like you said, the media. Just the media, they won't play. If a rapper's coming out, he's talking about something positive and a positive movement, he's not gonna get no airplay. But if he talk about shooting and killing and raping, he's gonna be the hottest artist out. And it's kind of like what you said with the Katrina thing. They're gonna put the dudes on TV with the pink hair and the gold teeth and just talking about nothing. But the guys who really have a positive message to push, the media is not going to push that. And so it's a lot of racial brainwash all sides of the fence, man. It's like we all have to do better, man. We all have to do better. It's mind blowing. I deal with it a lot in my business. I had a young player, a superstar player's mom one time tell me, Gaston, if you want to make it far in this business, you're gonna need to cut your hair. And this is a black parent. I said, wow. I've literally seen white guys walk into meetings with dingy hair. I mean, I seen a white agent walk into a meeting with some jeans and flip-flops, thong sandals with no socks. And the parent didn't say nothing. Now, I cannot do that. You know what I'm saying? And I think, like what you said, that goes back to racial brainwashing. It's like it's ingrained in us that, and not of course not all people, but just in my general experiences in this Asian business. But I think that's slowly changing with the younger generation. Parents that are in their 30s and 40s, that's changing. But parents that were in their late 40s and 50s, you know, I think it still was a lot of generational brainwashing, man. And it's just like, man, they're not doing it purposely or with intent, but it's like, if I walk in the room, oh, you too young, you don't know what you're doing. But if a young white guy walks in the room, no questions asked.
He's a prodigy.
You know,
the young white guy.
No questions asked, and the dude literally don't know nothing. You know, but he's okay, he's acceptable. And so, like I said, racial brainwashing, that's a great term, man, because it's just been ingrained in us, man. Even with the HBCU stuff, man, it's like, even when Makir Maker committed to Howard, it's like people didn't even congratulate him or celebrate him. Oh, he's not going anyway. Just enjoy the moment, man. You know. But
yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, because a lot of times it's like we as white people fail to understand. Y'all grew up in the same country we did, and y'all absorbed the same images we did.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, like I'll hear, like, if a black cop murders a black person, then a lot of white people say, well, I guess he must be a racist too. And they'll say it real, sarcastically. And I'll say, actually, yeah, probably. That person absorbed the same images that we absorbed. And unfortunately, regardless of your race and regardless of the subject you're trying to be brainwashed against, even if it's you, brainwashing is a real thing, and it's not easy to combat, but it's important that we do, right? That's the thing. Like, this was a while ago. I haven't had this type of reflexive, involuntary thought recently, but I remember like 10 years ago, I saw a black dude holding his daughter's hand walking down Elgin in 3rd Ward, and it was like I practically wanted to pull over and congratulate him for being a good father. Well, why did I feel that way? Well, because the media,
because they make it seem like all black parents are,
and it's like, now I corrected myself immediately, because I personally know, like, pretty well, like 50 black fathers or more, and I have one friend, hooped with him in high school. He is a deadbeat dad. He's not. I still think in his heart he's a pretty decent dude. You know, the girl that he had a kid with is out of her mind, and that may be a factor. It is true, though, that he doesn't send money or anything along those lines, and so he is, by definition, a deadbeat father. But that's one, 50 or 75, and even I have that reflexive, just and and again, I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, how many good black fathers do you have to know before you quit thinking black fathers are unicorns? And yet even I have that just a quick, and I think it's just really important for white people to fight against that. I don't think we can help having reflexive thoughts. That's kind of the definition of reflexive, right?
Well, I like what you said earlier, man. White people, you got to be allies, man. I don't want to say it's the wrong way, but I don't like white people that try to act clueless to what's going on. Like, oh no, there's no racism. Oh no, I didn't have nothing to do with slavery. If you acting like you don't know what's going on, to me, you're part of the problem. You have to be. I'm not saying you got to be on the front line with at the picket fence with a sign, but don't turn a blind eye and act like you don't know nothing what's going on. Like, I'm not racist, so I don't even understand why these people would do this and stuff. Like, at least you have to start with acknowledging that there is an issue. If you're not acknowledging that there's an issue, then you're part of the problem to me. Like, you have to acknowledge that hey, man, this is effed up, man. Like, I don't know what I can do to play my part to help, but at least show some type of acknowledgement. I don't like the white people that just act like there's nothing wrong. No, there's no racism. Like, they've never had, like, to me, that burns me up. Just acknowledge it. That's all I said. Just at least acknowledge it. At least start from there. That's the bare minimum,
I agree, and that's extremely well said. And the thing is that, so we all recognize the institution of slavery was evil. Everyone recognizes that. And the problem is that, did the children of the parents who were enslavers, were they looking back in 1875 and seeing their parents as evil? You know, and what about the grandkids and the great grandkids? And so part of the problem is that if we, as the current generation of white adults in America, in order for us to admit this shit still happens, we have to admit that we're part of it. And that means we have to admit that we're participating in evil, which means that we are evil. And that's a really complicated thing emotionally for people to admit. That's the main reason why we oftentimes just try to distract. George Floyd gets murdered. What about Chicago?
Right.
You know, the black people are so this is kind of an obscure stat, but black people are 12.5% of America, 39% of the prison population, but 63% of the people who've been exonerated based on DNA evidence. Okay, so 12.5% of the population is 63% of the exonerations, which means that those black people are convicted when they're innocent at a much higher rate than white people are, right? Well, so I mentioned that true stat, and a person says, well, black people are 600% more likely to commit homicide, right? It's like, okay, so, and I can break that down if you want to, because when you factor in population density and disproportional poverty, those two things together actually adds up to slightly more than 600%. So I can statistically explain to you why that's the case. Poverty is the mother of crime. We made black people poor on purpose, and we kept black people poor on purpose, and we stuck black people.
Yeah, people don't understand redlining and all that. People don't understand that, man. It's really systemic. They don't understand redlining and, you know, less funding for the schools.
To your earlier point, they don't want to understand. And that, I agree with you completely. That's what's so frustrating, is the information is available. You know, like if you're not okay with Japanese Americans being interred, I should say, during World War II, but you are okay with the fact that the government-backed mortgages for white veterans were approved by the banks, and government-backed mortgages for black veterans were not approved by the banks. Well, and so it's like I try to explain all the time to white people, there's this notion that family wealth somehow never gets inherited and is not predictive whatsoever of future wealth. It's like my family owns a ranch in Kerrville for 150 years or something like that. Your family doesn't, because we would not have let your family be a property owner, right? And so like we fail to connect.
Right.
We did not really allow black people a fair opportunity to own homes until, I should say, fairer, because it's still not fair. But we didn't even allow black people a remotely even close to fair opportunity to own homes until the 70s and the 80s. And what that means is the first generation of mass black inheritance hasn't even happened yet. Because we didn't allow black people to accumulate wealth at all until very recently. And
so, I was speaking with a financial advisor. I was speaking with a financial advisor the other day. He was telling me about a young black couple. They did $7.2 million in revenue. They tried to go to the bank to get like $100,000 loan, and it got denied. You know, like we do not. I mean, it's just crazy, man. It's like we always fighting the uphill battle, you know. And somebody made a great statement the other day. They was like, man, you know, white people have to give us a seat at the table, and they was like, that's the problem, that white people own the table. You know, we just asking for a seat. That's the issue right there. We got to start owning our own tables, you know, where we bring ourselves to the table. And that was one of the main reasons why I started my own agency. You know, I was working with a big company and a big firm, and I just seen the way it was, and the players it just wasn't personal. And I was like, if these guys can do it, why can't I do it on you know? So I wanted to create my own table so I can give other people opportunities that normally wouldn't get them. And that was very important to me.
Well, one, I commend you for that. And two, I'll give you a stat to color in what you were saying a moment ago about the couple with $7.2 million in revenue that was denied a $100,000 loan. In 2011, and we talked about before the interview started, it's like the two of the big problems I see with white people is one, we like to pretend to be isolated.
Your phone, your Zoom is freezing a lot. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think are you on your phone or iPad or laptop or?
Yeah, I'm on my phone.
If you will go to airplane mode and Wi-Fi only, it will probably fix the problem. Because there's probably part of the signal through the cell tower. Is my guess.
Okay. Hold on one second. Let me see. Airplane.
And then turn the Wi-Fi on, and you should be good to go.
Okay. Okay. Hello.
Yep. Is that good? Is that better?
Oh, that's much better.
Okay.
Much better.
So, and for the record, it's really embarrassing for you that I had to be your technical consultant.
Oh man, hey man, I'm not no tech guy. Hey, I'm not on the geek squad, man. I'm not at all. I'm not gonna lie to you.
I'm not either. It's like the first time ever I've been able to help someone technically. I feel so proud.
Yeah, I'm not. Hey man.
Like I remember I was hooping like 10 years. I'm totally retired from hooping now because I got way too fat and now I'm losing weight, but I'm 45. And it's just a bad idea. I'm too competitive. You start playing hard, you rip an Achilles, and boom, I'm not trying to rip an Achilles. But like 10 years ago, I was hooping. I was like 300 pounds, and this dude went up, and I threw his shit, and I said, man, you need to be really ashamed right now. That's the first motherfucking shot I've blocked in 15 years.
Oh man.
But anyway, so in 2011, so the one thing is we like to say it's isolated because all we see is the tippy top of the iceberg, which is the murders that are caught on film. We don't see the back alley brutality, and we don't at all see the massive foundation of the harassment. The overwhelming majority of my black friends have had experiences like you've had. Have been walking down the street with their friends in high school on their way to the park. Cop rolls up, all on the curb, hands behind their back, handcuffs on, IDs checked, and these are kids. Like, yep. I never one time in my, if not all white neighborhood, majority white neighborhood, I never one time, 15 years old, walking down the street with my friends on my way to the park, I never one time that the cops roll up and put me in cuffs and ask for my ID. And so the one thing is we insist it's isolated because we don't make the cultural connection between the nonviolent harassment and the brutality and the murder. And I've said this before on a lot of these interviews. There's no way black lives can matter until black rights matter.
Wow.
These things are connected.
Wow.
And then the other thing we talked about before we started was we always, as white people, like say, oh, that's a long time ago. Yeah, that was terrible, but that's a long time ago. Right. Well, 2011 is when the government hit Bank of America with a $335 million fine because they were caught flagrantly discriminating against black barbers.
Wow.
And so the record needs to formally reflect 2011 was not a long time ago.
This was, you said Chase Bank?
Bank of America.
Oh, Bank of America. Wow.
Well, and I haven't seen the information, but I just about guarantee you. I mean, I know that Wells Fargo, with all the mortgage bundling and shit, they were flagrantly fucking black people around too. Now, I don't have an exact stat. That stat comes directly from my book. So that's the reason why I can recite it offhand. But it's not, again, like how about this? Looking at 1 year only, 2015, and looking only at the 10 biggest police departments, they collectively had to pay $250 million in police brutality settlements. Okay, so we're talking about 10 departments, 1 year. $250 million. That doesn't sound like it's isolated to me.
No.
If Bank of America had discriminated against a small handful of black borrowers, I don't think the fine would have been $335 million. And for context sake, the Catholic Church in its whole history, every parish, the last 75 years since the abuse first started coming to light, the total amount they've paid is $3 billion. So we're talking about 1 year, only 10 police departments is 1/12 the amount of what the Catholic Church has paid in its entirety. And we certainly don't look at that and pretend that that's isolated, right? We recognize that's a pervasive problem that needs to be addressed. But for some reason, when you're looking at black people having their rights violated and black people being brutalized and black people being murdered and black people being denied loans and black people being denied the opportunity to move into the apartment of their choice because a landlord's too racist to rent to a black person. And it's like when you look at these things together, it's not isolated and it's not a long time ago. So I wonder, my friend, if you got anything, any final thoughts before we get back with our Fridays?
No, man, that was a great conversation. You actually gave me a lot of facts that I didn't know, like about the Bank of America, even the comparison to the Catholic Church, because nobody looks at the stuff that goes on in the Catholic Church as isolated incidents. Nobody looks at it like that. But I mean, you gave some great stats, some great points, man. I just think we got to do better. If I don't know something about something, I'm going to read upon it. I'm going to research it. I'm not going to just speak on something I don't know about. And like I said, white people have to stop turning a blind eye, man. Just acknowledge that there is privilege, that this does go on. Like, don't turn a blind eye, because then I'm going to start thinking, okay, you're racist. You know, that's just the God's honest truth. So just acknowledge that what is going on, man. We all got to do better, man. We all have to do better.
Yeah, and so I did not write my book for black people because y'all aren't the problem with racism.
Right.
But there is a lot of stuff in there. So if you do pick up a copy and read it, just understand going in that my target audience is white people, especially white moderates and white racists. And I think moderates are racist, just lower on the spectrum than what we consider them to be. And so because I believe white fragility is a real thing, I want white people to keep turning the pages. And so my tone is, I've been accused of coddling racists with the tone in which I wrote my book. So just know, if you're going to buy it, and start reading it, that's done by design. I want them to keep turning pages. Gotcha. So if I come right out and it's like I think they can handle a mixed drink better than a shot. And so my book is like a mixed drink. And again, that's strategic. So if you do decide to pick up a copy, take the info that helps you, but please don't be mad at me for my coddling of white racists, because again, my tone is what it is, strategically and by design. And I've been engaging with white racists in person and online, in person since '88 and online since there was an internet. So I think that, after George Floyd got murdered, I mean, I've seen a lot of shit that's caused me to be more hopeful than I normally am on this topic, because I'm not kidding you, man. I've had 10, 15, maybe more white people hit me up and be like, man, you were right all along. We should have been listening. We're going to listen now. It's like,
well, I appreciate your honesty and your outlook on it, man. Because like I said, the average white person is like, it don't affect me, so I'm going to keep it pushing, like, And so, just the way your approach to it, and you're really trying to understand. A lot of people just want to argue and prove their point, but you're really taking it from a point of really trying to understand and get to the root of the problem and really grasp it. When the average person is not trying to do that. They just trying to say, oh, man, that was slavery, man. I had nothing to do with slavery, blah, blah. That's not me. Yeah, you do have something to do with it. You are a product of that. You know what I'm saying? You're still benefiting from it. So just admit that fact, and that's okay.
The analogy I often use is that slavery is the ocean liner. How long does it take for the wake to disappear, to dissipate into the ocean? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's true. We didn't build the ocean liner, and we didn't take a journey on the ocean liner, but we've been riding the fuck out of that wake,
right,
150 plus years, and acting like, oh, that's the That's the ocean liner. The wake has the, the shit doesn't stop on a dime. So I did this will wig you out a little bit. It'll be an interesting fact and also a depressing fact. I did an independent study on George Patton when I was in college, a history major. And Trinity University, my alma mater, keeps the full congressional records in the library. Really excellent resource. And I'm flipping through the index to get to P for Patton. And I start to notice as I'm getting there that like there are some entries that have like hundreds of pages, right? And then some entries have like 3 entries, right? So I start making a note like, oh wow, like the, whatever, the MacArthur, Douglas MacArthur with an M. Man, he's got like 20 pages. Damn, that's pretty, And as I'm going, well, guess what word that starts with a letter that comes between M for MacArthur and P for Patton had just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages in the congressional records.
Wow.
Congressional records. And
well, just using it like it's an everyday thing.
Correct. And I always try to explain to white people the idea that there would be a senator using the N-word in 1964, but by 1966, he was totally cured of his racism and was a staunch ally to black people. That's preposterous. The shit doesn't stop on a dime. Like if we can acknowledge, we all acknowledge on a rational level that the institution of slavery ended in 1865 with the conclusion of the Civil War, okay? 100 years later, we still had segregation, massive income inequality, horrible police brutality, and you name it. And we all recognize rationally that it was still real bad in the early 60s prior to the Voting Rights Act and Civil Rights Act. And I'm always like, guys, if a 4-year civil war didn't fix racism, and we know it didn't because 100 years later the shit was still real bad, right? If 100 years after a 4-year war, racism's still bad, we know the war didn't fix it, why the fuck would you think 2 packages of federal laws fixed it? Like, how is that even possible?
Right.
Of course it didn't. We know the Tuskegee experiment was still taking place in the 70s, right? We know that the Supreme Court did not even declare it unconstitutional to deliberately have an all-white jury with a black defendant until 86. That wasn't even unconstitutional until 86. And it's like, come on, guys, the shit doesn't stop on a dime. It's just not logical.
Right.
It's just not logical to think that it does, So,
we got a long way to go. Like you said, we're making baby steps. And as long as we're moving forward, man, but we have a long way to go, man. I think it starts with just acknowledgement, man. It starts with acknowledgement. Acknowledging, okay, we have a long way to go, man.
Same thing with and that's literally any problem. You can't fix it if you won't admit it. And
exactly.
I lost probably 60 pounds. And and I'm still fat as shit, but I was much fatter before. But the entire time I'm like, I carry my weight well. If I'm going to choose to deny the problem, how in the world can I fix it?
Right.
And racism, of course, is the same thing. And sticking on fatness, another big problem we have here is what I call self-issued comparative clemency. Okay, so like right now, I probably weigh about 290. That's 50 pounds overweight. At 45 years old, 290 is way too heavy. Right, I'm getting in the stroke, heart attack type of right. I need to keep being healthy, and I will. I'm pretty well committed to getting that side of my life in order. But what I can't do is look at my current weighing 290 and look at pictures of myself weighing 350 and do the self-issue comparative clemency thing where I say, no, I'm not fat now. I was fat then. No, bitch, you're still fat. And as racist, that's what we do, right? We say, oh, I'm not a racist. Hitler's a racist.
No, that's an extreme. You're not extreme. You just.
Exactly. There's a scale. Like I write in the book about I have a chapter called Scale, where it's like, look, on the 1 to 10 racist scale, if you're not a 0, you're a racist. And I consider myself to be a racist still to this day. because, like, for example, if let's say we're meeting for lunch
Mm-hmm.
and you're 10 minutes late, I'm going to be probably chuckling to myself about CPT.
Yep.
And well, so that's not hateful. And that PPT is mostly an inside joke amongst black people. That's
I was late to the interview today, man.
right. And so, like, that's an inside joke amongst black people. Y'all give each other a good-natured hard time on that
Right.
topic, right? And one, obviously, white people are often late as well. But that's an inside joke I was brought in on by black people, right? Like 20 years ago. Well, it doesn't matter that it's an inside joke black people taught me. It doesn't matter that it's not hateful. It doesn't matter that I'm not angry. But the minute I associate your behavior with your race, I'm being a fucking racist.
Wow.
That's what a racist does.
Wow.
You know, and so but that's back to the self-issue comparative clemency. I do not get to point at white people who are more racist than I am and absolve myself for my own racism. I have to own my own shit so that I can continue to work through it,
Right.
as I have for more than 30 years, you know. So anyway, my friend, it's great to catch up, man. It's been too long.
Yes, sir, man. Mexico City, man. You out there living the life, man.
Yeah, I'm doing my best. Of course, COVID is greatly disrupting good times. And I'm deliberately reminding myself constantly that, so my nightlife has been ruined, but I'm not homeless. I'm not dead. My livelihood's okay. Like, so I'm trying to not fall into the, like, to the extent that I deserve a spot in the pity pool, it's the motherfucking shallow end. And I need to keep that in mind, right? So, you know, I'm deliberately trying to not wallow in self-pity because, relatively speaking, I'm doing great. And I need to be appreciative of that. So, yeah. But anyway, man, it's great to catch up. Chris,
man, sure appreciate you, man. Keep doing good things, man. Like this, like I said, I appreciate your honesty and your view, your vantage points, man. It's very rare coming from a white man just being honest. You know, they rarely can see it from our shoes. They don't have empathy.
Well, the appreciation here is a two-way street. I appreciate you as well. And
sure.
hopefully we will talk soon. Thanks again.
Okay. All right, man.